not to say it's the worst thing you can do, but something that you're gonna feel more consequences to is not deciding on stuff. And then having that like visceral response of thinking where it's like you're not doing something because it's like you thought to do something, then you're like, no, shouldn't, instead of like a lot of times you could just do something and then do something else and then do something else. And then your day becomes very full. But it's almost like that process of thinking about it, of considering, of weighing the options. Because like as soon as there's a trickle of that, like there's so much there that opens up, you know, like so many considerations, like so many things to think about basically. But a lot of times it will stem from that initial sense of insecurity that like so often you can have this immediate response to that just kind of cuts it, but doesn't actually look at it or face it. Instead of part of the process maybe is seeing what the side of not immediately going to that habitual response is, and then sometimes going through enough suffering in that spot where it's like, all right, I'm just going to start being more decisive about things and let things fall as they will and not think about it. Because I've, you know, at least, especially in the last couple months, like experienced very much both, and both see like, you know, when it isn't so many consideration and just do, feel so obvious. And then as soon as you're not feeling that as much, you feel very far from that. And then it can almost build to a point where it's like, well, I've done this for so long, should just, you know, like at some point you just got to cut it and be like, yeah, I stop now. And that's it.
It's the only time you can.
Yeah.
Isn't that the funny way? It's always going to be now. Always. And that's why it always feels totally new whenever you do stop. But see, I find it's funny because there's so many experiences we have where we see this in action. Speaking is one. Art, music, when it's played like live and people are just jamming, that kind of thing, like to just get into it and not think about yourself is to find the flow, is to be able to add to the flow. But if you're thinking about it, you're insecure, like, oh, I'm not as good as these people, you're likely not going to enjoy it. You're not going to be part of that flow. Speaking, same thing. You can be going through a sentence, everything's going fine because you're really, really passionate about what you're saying, and all of a sudden you wonder about what was that word? And you hesitate for just 1 second and the whole flow just gets fucking derailed. And you've got that thought of, no, where'd the flow go? But you didn't have to do that. The whole point was you had a moment of doubt. You had a moment where you could think about yourself, and you can let that moment go. And then the next time around, maybe you won't have that moment. And if you do, you won't care because it's just stumbling over a word. What's the problem with that?
It's a great question, because I'll have that, like, admittedly, I can be so sensitive to stumbling over words that it's like, it's funny to rewatch. Kind of. It's also like, oh Jesus, like let yourself be a bit.